I am back with the third installment to my new series from The Quiet Voice. I've tried to record this a couple times now and I've got issues. I'm learning, so thank you for bearing with me. This is new for me. But I went through my intro the last time, the first one was my introduction, why I'm making this. The second one was a little bit why I chose the name A Quiet Voice. And it is now a name I've been using it's 2025 right now, for about 9 or 10 years. So I have just kind of taken that on as my handle to today. What I really wanted to talk about is a little bit of the history of my family, because some of what I'm going to share you're not going to understand unless you've been in a cult. You're not going to understand unless you've been in a high control, high fear religion. And some of you are in a religious environment that's healthy. And you'll see real quick, these are different things. The one that I was in was incredibly unhealthy. And it's one of the reasons I had to just get away from religion altogether, because once you're in something like this that's so toxic, there's not the temptation for the human mind and psyche is to just take away the hurt and the pain and replace it with something else. But that's not healing now, is it? It's not. And we'll talk later on about that. I want to tell you about my family. My parents have been married for almost 55 years. They come from a long line of family members that are all, as they will tell, are following the same belief systems that they are, and have been for generations. So you have my parents. They were raised religious, and my dad was raised on a farm as a farm boy, just wholesome farm boy, and he went into the natural sciences and later retired and purchased the land next to the old family farm and combined them, only to have that farm kind of fail and them have to sell it. There's a lot more to that story, but that's not my story, and it doesn't really matter. But that is my father, and his parents were both farmers from that same area. Now, to understand a little bit about them, they were known in high regard. And in the town that they live, my dad is even known as a don of the town and has a key to the city, because the family name has been there so long, longer than the city was a city. And here's what we know, what I understand about that family. And I this is my understanding. Many generations ago, my father's family came across the prairie on the covered wagons, and they settled in Southern California. Not a bad spot to settle. And in doing that, they were able to homestead some lands and some properties and start farms. That's great. It is known that on the land that they lived, the Chumash Indians did live. They had a settlement there. When I was a little girl, when we would go to the family farm, there was always artifacts from the Indians around, just mixing bowls and rocks, and we would play with them, and it just was not a big deal. I never thought anything of it. It's like, oh, they used to live here, that's nice. It never occurred to me that they're not there because of something that I myself was a part of. And I realize that now. It was never brought up how the Indians left or why they left. I do remember like vague conversations of things like, well, they just moved on. The Indians they would migratory. That they were not like that. No, they had been there hundreds and hundreds of years. That's my dad's family, and both sides of his family were farmers, like in that area. My mom's family, a little more diversified, although still heavily religious. Her mother was Southern. So Southern, like no white after Labor Day Southern. And very religious. Everyone was a model. She was a model. She had health issues. anorexia, drinking, smoking, all of this for that image issues. So there were issues there that we will never know. But clearly what we know now about with therapy and psychology is that she was clearly hiding and holding on to something. It's super sad. Okay. Her family, like the grandmother, they, back in the day, were proud plantation owners. Yeah, I don't need to say any more. They were absolutely slave owners. And I don't know, nobody answers questions about that. You and I, you and me, we know that what that means is that atrocities were done at their hands to very innocent people. And they happened regularly and redundantly and over again. Just for selfishness, to get what they want, whether it be children that they didn't ever document, things like that. Or just using people in general. It's wrong. I don't care who you are. I've never heard my family acknowledge that. I will be the generation to say that is fucking wrong. That is wrong. Sorry for the cuss word. I gotta watch that. But let me be the one to say that that's wrong. And I want nothing. I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want to even financially benefit from that. I don't want to carry that. I don't want that I don't want that energy in my life. And you can cleanse it and stuff like that, but it's a little too close to me. My mom's father was raised by a single mom. The story that I know is that the grandfather abandoned them and during kind of the Depression, and went and lived off somewhere with his chickens. I think they called him, yeah, he had a nickname they called him, and his dogs. And he just was kind of a hermit, which I'm telling you is not a bad deal. I kind of am getting that. And the problem being raised in the way that I was raised, when my mother would speak of her families. Now, keep in mind, these families were all very matriarchal and run by women. However, they still held to the beliefs that the men were the priests. So they were, even though they were underneath and below men in their cultural kind of society, they manipulated and they would teach the women how to study and coerce and affect and influence the men to do what they would like them to do, or make the decisions they would like them to do. It wasn't ever, in my understanding, it never was a partnership. It was always a structured organization of, and if it was a partnership, it was that you agreed to your role. As a woman, you had 2 roles, maybe 3. 1, be the support and helper to your husband. So that meant you had to have a husband. That meant you had to support him and be, basically his assistant and all the things. Number 2, you had to have children. So you had to have children. And the more, the better. So that's what women knew. If you were infertile or couldn't have children, you really do get notched down in that societal framework. You really lose your worth. If you don't have a husband, you don't have worth. You are basically under the men in the church, which means that you basically are a caretaker for them and their children. And number 3, kids, man, I don't know. But I'm sure I broke that rule too. Anyway, back to my grandfather. He was brilliant. He was on the team of 5 during World War, I believe, II, that created radar. So he is an amazing, brilliant man. And my grandmother was also brilliant, but had to play this role of, So I only knew her in a role. I never knew her. My grandmother on my father's side, my grandfather passed away really young. He died from cancer as well, but that was from the chemicals sprayed on the plants and the trees. What I will say is my grandmother was even worse. Like that side, the paternal grandmother absolutely controlled the boys and with manipulation and a lot of other things. So there's a lot more to those stories and a lot more I will never know, but things that I know now that I've left the religion and I've studied, I've read up, I've had lots of therapy. I understand so much more now. And I look at the outline of these people and I am just like, I know what I'm looking at now. These people that are in this religion that because they were expected to be. I mean, you have to understand if the women ever left, they would be abandoned. There would be no one. Their entire culture, their entire society that they knew would turn against them. The men, now, it was a little different because men, being the priests, could bob and weave, and they made it that way. Most of the men weren't bad men; they were good men, if not simple. And so they were easily manipulated. But that is my family. And when we look at our generation, one year my sister did a like the DNA family tree thing. And she got back to the 1500s. I don't know if she ever finds this, she can correct me. But in that, we found that this flavor of religion was followed to a T. I know now from genetics that there are other children around there or cousins. And what was it today? There was like a second half cousin. I don't know, it was nuts. It turned out my grandfather, there was a child that was from my grandfather. And he didn't know. None of us knew. But this man exists. Anyway, weird stuff like that. But no one ever mentions that. We hear a mention of my father's family being heavily farmers. We hear stories of them having lots of children, yet you never hear stories of the children. I have since heard stories of them leaving because they want to do business, go into business, or they met someone and got married and nothing to ever hear from them again. These families just disappeared off of the history. And if you want to ask me about what I think about that, I think it's probably because they left that religion or did something terrible and took a family somewhere and maybe abandoned them. Because in that day and age, like, seriously, if you were a woman with children and nothing, that is just a death sentence. And yeah, that was in play too. So, I mean, normal people in what I once thought was an abnormal family, but now I see it's pretty normal. But but this religious thread goes through all that. And what we end up seeing is that those who leave the religion are erased from the family. Let me say that again. Consistently, what we see is those who leave the religion are erased or not even documented within the family. Now, I think my story will be a little different because I was so active in that world and with the family in that religious context my whole life up until 40s. And my ex-husband, while a terrible being in general and a liar, like, there's a lot of things, there's a reason, was able to play that game pretty well. And being that loud, glib American, that is the role that those churches are grooming men to be. So as you understand, so the females basically have children, serve men, serve men, serve men. and that is your goal. You are to study your man and to create a world around him that would make him feel at home and be conducive to him loving you more. Like, so from the word go, love was a currency. Love was a result of actions you did for another person, then you would receive love. It was not something that was given to you freely, and it was not something that was just given. It was something like there had to be some sort of, I'm trying to think of the word, like something that began this chain reaction. Whether it be, putting yourself below someone because there is this air of needing to be superior. So I've noticed the families, there's this need of superiority to be able to help others. And especially if those others are not in their religious circle. Because what they want to do is capitalize on their generosity and capitalize on their actions and be able to say, hey, guess what? I helped this girl down the road. She needed a lot of help. She was lost. She's not a believer, but we're going to minister to her and to her family because maybe they will become Christians. And that was really the mentality. So unhealthy for a young child to grow up in that world, and that is the world I grew up in. I was from the word go, part of the religious teachings. My parents still teach to this day, and that many of the people who we would follow in the day would teach. Think John MacArthur, Piper, Dobson, Gothard was a big one. Then we were involved in all of the things like Sparks, 5-day clubs, the vacation Bible schools, and I'll talk more about those because those are indoctrination camps. All of those things build to indoctrinating and programming a child. To get the child ready for those, my mom teaches women how to break the spirit of their child. I wish this wasn't true. Because what I know now, and the thing is, a lot of these patterns I followed when I was a young mother, I even helped teach them to others. That was one of my roles. But I see how harmful it is now, and I see how wrong it is now, and if I can do anything to stop this, I will. But the goal was to break your child's spirit. What does that look like? Breaking their ability to say no. Teaching them that no does not matter. Teaching them they are not allowed to question anyone in authority, and that is them. But moreover, it's not just them, it's any adult, and more than that, any male. Because I'm female, any male. You do not question authority. You obey. You just obey. And corporal punishment was big. I wouldn't have said before that my parents have abused us. I really don't think that they thought they were following the patterns that they were hearing and that they were adopting, and that they were trying to do the best they could with what they had, but they would hurt us. And it was a big thing. Like, my mom had a bulletin board. There were 5 kids, and I'm in the middle. And she had a little square on the bulletin board with little like lace in a rectangle. And that day, if you had done something worth getting a spanking, and it could be anything, you had to put your hands on that bulletin board at night during dinner while everyone else is sitting there in front of, watching you, and you would receive your spankings. My dad would take out this board that he cut so he could hold it, the paddle, and he sanded down the edges so there weren't sharp edges, but like basically it's probably about that. I don't know, it's pretty thick. And you'd put your hands on this bulletin board and take your spankings. Now, if he didn't think that you were repentant, he would keep spanking you. So the game was then the fake crying. Could you fake cry? Could you pretend like that hurt? Or, I'm not much of a pretender or a liar, so there are times I told him it didn't hurt, or I would laugh at him and I'd just be beaten more. But what that did is normalize personal pain because you disagreed with someone. Normalize the expectation of self-injury and injury to yourself by someone you love and trust because you said no. Now, I understand as a parent, it's hard. It's a hard balance. But I'm telling you, this is next level. Now, my parents, my mom would say, well, it could be a lot worse. Her parents were a lot more violent with her. Okay. My dad doesn't talk much about it at all. Like, he really doesn't. I don't know why. But maybe just because he was the middle of two, maybe just because he was a good kid. I don't really know. But, any mother, any parent, anyone that's been around kids knows that there are those kids that are like really good kids. And then there are kids that are really curious kids. They're not bad. And the good ones aren't even that good. They just are more acceptable in society in the way they behave for whatever reason. So this is the foundation of the world I grew up in. They would take these teachings from generations. They would take their Bibles. My mom has her Bible, and she claims that it is the true Word of God fully and completely, and she has the original Bible. She has told me this. I wish I could make some of this stuff up. But so you can't disagree. You can't argue with anyone like that because they're not teachable. And that's where my parents are right now. So as I kind of start to talk about how things started progressing with me, and they hit a point where what was happening in my life could not coexist with their doctrination and with their belief systems. And so they decided that what was happening in my life was unusual and rare and evil. And they decided to lock into the world that they were in, not grow, not change, not learn. And so from my background, that's where you kind of see that. I have two sisters that I love and adore. They are still in that, and they're, they have their own journeys, and so do their children. And I have two brothers that I don't talk with. And a lot of that is because of how they do treat me, how they have treated me through like horribly difficult and atrocious times. And then how they responded when they learned that I was being injured and I was in danger. But again, it all goes back to they are the priests. They know better than any woman. And who am I to say and speak ill of anyone? Again, we will get into those details. But that's my family. As far as I know, as far as they have cared to document, nobody has left that religion, has left it but me. My mother would say that her brother never was religious and did not know her God. Towards his death, she said that, he came to Jesus and he's in heaven, whatever. He did not. He didn't. Anyway, but my point being is that there was nothing wrong with my uncle ever. He was the smartest of them all. He knew what was real and what wasn't. I wish I would have listened to him more. But anyway, everyone else that has been known or documented is still following except me. And that's where my story begins. Now we rewound and we went through kind of that foundation of who my family was and is, and what that means to me. And we will get into that as we go forward. But yeah, that's the foundation of my family, is this pious spirituality. I would like to call it Christianity. It is, but it's extreme. And but I kind of look at Christianity in the world right now, Mormon, Protestant, Catholic, listen, religion. And it seems like it's evolved into this real extremism in a lot of ways that it was never meant to be. That is how I was raised. And I followed suit. Once I was broken, my mother used to say I was the hardest one to break. Once I was broken, then they were able to indoctrinate me and brainwash me, really. And so I didn't realize that till I was in my 40s. I didn't realize that you could do that to a person until I was in my 40s, because we were told that that was only done if you allowed someone, so you never allowed anyone close enough to you to influence you. And yet they were right here the whole time, pulling strings and controlling. That's my family. Yeah. I will say there are some really great, kind people, but they're stuck in it too. They might not have woken up yet, but they're stuck. So anyway, part of this is me hoping that should anything come out of, anyone else try to leave that cult and get out, that they know that they're not alone. I have already paved that path. I have paid richly to get out, and I'm paying daily for it. I don't know how much longer I'll be around. So let's just get this information out there so that at least others know that they're not alone. And if I'm here or not, at least someone has already gone through this. Maybe it'll give you some sort of peace, or maybe even education. I don't know. Love you all. Talk to you soon.